Today, Balenos is part of the Republic of Calpheon, the country that dominates the western half of the Black Desert continent. Merely 20 years ago, it was a sovereign kingdom. During the main quest in this territory, you learn what happened here more than a century ago and deal with the remnants of the past, but the full picture of the land's history is not given. You might have heard about the Kingdom of Balenos and the Kingdom of Cron. In this video, we will go through a summary of its historical evolution, from its uncertain origins, its rise and fall, and its current status as a constituent part of the Republic. The land known now as Balenos has been inhabited for thousands of years, as evidenced by the scattered ruins in the Agris Steppe and the ancient stone chamber. This territory used to be part of the Kingdom of Kabua, the country eventually led by those who saved the world 8,000 years ago. There are 3 pieces of information hinting at this. Sage's texts tell us that in the land of his civilization, before the Black Spirit invasion, there was an Agris river. The seemingly native Balenosian god of abundance, now out of favor, is called Agris. The legend of Idana is inscribed on the walls of the ancient stone chamber, and one of the doors that lead to Ataraxion, a fortress planned by Rux, Sage's original self, is here. We also know the original Rux became one of the Idana. And the prophecy of Cron Castle, also inscribed on the walls of the ancient stone chamber, was made by King Kabua, the second life of King Noir Agris Bartali. Unfortunately, the current historical records do not specify what events occurred in this land during the period between its founding, the Black Spirit invasion, and the modern age. It is likely that, like the rest of the continent, it experienced a golden age under the rule of the Idana, and that it gradually decayed until all trace of its glorious past was forgotten. Regarding the religious beliefs of the people back then, we only know that by 8,000 years ago, the texts about the prophecies bestowed upon Margahan by the deity Agris were already well known. Rux himself, we are told, believed to be part of them. From that time, 8,000 years ago, we move on to the last couple of centuries. The earliest records we have of the Kingdom of Cron come from its sunset years, roughly by the Eleonian year 135. They tell us of the reign of its last monarch, commonly localized as King Noir Bartali III, Noir III, or Bartali III. One thing we'd like to clarify here is the confusion regarding the third in his name. A detailed explanation of this will be released in the future, but it is important to state that King Noir was neither the third monarch of Cron called Noir, nor the third one called Bartali. If we properly translate his name and title, it is more accurately transcribed as King Noir, third of the Bartali dynasty. Going back to the topic at hand, we don't know for how long the Kingdom of Cron had existed before King Noir's rule, only that by his time it was a regional power. Some sources say it competed with Calpheon for dominance, that at least 3 members of House Bartali had sat on the throne, and that the belief in the god of abundance, Agris, persisted in some capacity. The royal family even gave the middle name Agris to their offspring because, according to legend, they were the direct descendants of this deity. We're told King Noir was just a kind monarch who kept the ambition of the nobility at bay, expanded his royal authority across the realm, and served his people as best as he could, until he grew old. With age came the fear of death, and this one strangled the king. Time twisted him into someone obsessed with refusing the Grim Reaper's call. One day, an alchemist came from the east, sought an audience with the king, and promised him the same immortality the alchemist himself possessed. In exchange, the king needed to help him prepare and carry out a ritual. The king agreed and subsequently exiled, punished, or killed all those who stood against the pursuit of acquiring eternal life. On one fateful day, a certain ritual was held to call forth the alchemist's patron. Day became night when the sun was covered by darkness. But quickly, a brave soldier stepped in and managed to stop the ritual, causing an explosion. Cron Castle and its outlying town, the seat of the kingdom, were obliterated. King Noir and the greedy officials who had stayed by his side during those few last weeks of madness were all believed to have been killed. However, as for the alchemist, nobody found him. From that day onward, the kingdom of Cron was no more. As for the fate of King Noir, in truth, his wish was half granted. Instead of immortality, he was given the chance at a new life. He appeared more than 8,000 years ago, and there he became King Kabua, founder of the Kingdom of Kabua. In the aftermath of the explosion, many of the survivors of the heartland of the kingdom fled to the coastal village of Velia and beyond, and started a new life in new lands, doing their best to forget the calamity they had experienced. Though the king and his entire family were believed to have been caught in the disaster, distant relatives from another branch of the Bartali dynasty arrived and took the reins, avoiding a power vacuum. To distance themselves from the horrors committed by King Noir, they decided to rename the nation. From then on, it would be called the Kingdom of Balenos. As such, the new monarch became the founding king of this new kingdom. Additionally, the seat of power and royal residence was moved from the crumbling ruins of Cron Castle to the western villa of Olvia. The reason for this was threefold. First, as mentioned before, to distance themselves from being connected to their deceased relatives. Second, because rebuilding both the castle and castle town would be too costly. And last, because the disaster that happened that day never actually ended, and people claimed the spirits of the dead lingered on, tormenting the living who dared set foot in the area. To us, the territorial extent of the defunct Kingdom of Cron is unknown, but we know this new Kingdom of Balenos, up to 100 years ago, extended to both Ilia Island and Lemma Island in the north, with Lemma having been recently claimed. To the west, south, and east, it had roughly the same borders as the territory of Balenos does in the present day. Did the new kingdom prosper like the old? We only know that it appears those in charge of the country never held any ambition to increase the wealth of either the land or its people. Perhaps they had taken a sort of creed against the greed that caused the old kingdom's demise. Or perhaps they were just content to leave things as they were. It is possible, but still speculation, that around this time Balenos had a king named Barrett, who was responsible for the inaction of the country in his regard. However, the rest of the world did not follow the same course. While Balenos stagnated as a country of farmers living off the land, never grasping the endless possibilities that being a coastal nation offers, other regions took advantage. Calpheon, to the west, with only a portion of the coast Balenos possessed, had established a port town, carried out trade by sea with other nations, and eventually created a navy to protect its interests at sea. Here, we theorize that the lack of activities at sea by the Kingdom of Balenos, together with its seemingly de jure possession of many of the islands of the northern archipelago, may have led to the dramatic increase in piracy that the northern seas of the continent are famous for in the present day. In the year 235, the Black Death spread westward throughout the entire continent, a disease that rotted the flesh black and killed all who caught it. No cure was ever found. It is attested that the population of the human kingdoms was halved due to this malady. Balenos was no exception. The different kingdoms of the western half of the continent gathered under the leadership of Calpheon and declared war on the Kingdom of Valencia in the eastern deserts, for they believed it to be the culprit behind the Black Death. While not directly stated, the few mentions of Olvia re-establishing trade with Valencia later in time greatly hint at Balenos having been part of this coalition, at least initially. Several military expeditions were sent to conquer Valencia. They all failed. Each expedition took years to prepare and was an increasing burden on the country's finances. They depleted manpower and made sluggish any possible growth of the land's wealth. Coupled with Balenos seemingly being unwilling to exploit their northern frontier, the country severely fell behind in all aspects. The natural disasters that ensued in the years 264 to 267 did not help the country. We do not know how exactly Balenos was affected, but we know there were typhoons at sea and earthquakes, tsunamis, droughts, and floods on the land. It is improbable that the land was left unscathed from all of that. It likely suffered years of bad harvests and resulting tragedies. It was after the last expedition in those years that the Calpheon-Valencia War de facto ended. There was no peace treaty, there was no peace conference. Simply, each side stopped warring and started to take care of the internal issues they all faced due to nature's wrath and the barbarian invasions. However, something may have happened before this, or during this period. We know that Balenos and Calpheon were in a military conflict against each other. In the story of Prince Leonardo of Calpheon and Princess Olivia from Balenos, Leonardo's father, Dahad Serik, was alive until the end. Dahad died on that last expedition to Valencia that ended the war, and during the story we're told Calpheon was at war with Balenos. Something happened in those years, or before, that made Balenos break off from the military alliance against Valencia and start fighting against Calpheon. For now, we have found no records of what caused this. Prince Leonardo's story ended some years after Dahad's death, with Calpheon mustering an army of reckoning to avenge their prince's death and conquering Balenos for good. We know this to be the case because the prince was alive, mourning his father's death, as revealed during the king's key questline of Nova. Like before, we lack evidence to explain how the country fared during this time. We know the religion of Elionism, if not present before, was now a part of the nation, with priests converting the natives. We do know that, by a text describing an event later in time, it is presumed the kingdom of Balenos continued to exist in some capacity, at least on paper, as a tributary vassal to Calpheon. As with other human realms, this one is home to several unintegrated demi-human races, the so-called barbarian tribes. In this case, goblins and imps. Around these last few decades, the imps started to grow violent and expelled the goblins from the Agris steppe, forcing them to the eastern and southern forests. This, in turn, started to affect the nations, as goblins started to take up plundering trade caravans as a way of life. Due to this, the eastern forests started to be called the Forest of Plunder. In turn, the imps would eventually start to attack trade caravans in the fields of Agris to the west as well, believing the deterioration of ancient ruins they had taken for themselves was caused by humanity. This was likely the action they took as a response to having once been practically enslaved by humans, forced to work menial jobs in exchange for meager salaries. It was only a bit later, in the year 275, that Olvia re-established trade relations with Valencia via the merchant city of Altinova in Medea, together with Hydel and Keplen, both of which were capitals of independent kingdoms at the time. This is the bit of information mentioned earlier that hints at Balenos having likely enjoyed a large degree of autonomy, even while being formally under Calpheon's authority at the time. It had the freedom to establish trading relations on its own without its overlord's permission. As we're told later, Calpheon did the same. It can also be argued that Calpheon's control was gone by this time, and the kingdom was independent. However, the conversation the three princes of Serendia had with their father, the king, just a year later in the year 276, shows this is not the case. In that conversation, one of the princes claims that if he is made king, he will wage war against Calpheon to take control of Balenos and have their little sister rule it. This is not possible unless Balenos continued to be part of Calpheon at the time, even if only nominally. Shortly after this, the Calpheon-Serendia War took place, though for reasons completely different than those exposed just now. Calpheon declared war on the pretext that, like with the conquest of Balenos before, this time a princess of their country had died in Serendia. In truth, they wanted the black stone deposits of Serendia, but that's a story for another time. Why mention the Calpheon-Serendia War in a video about the history of Balenos as a country? Because we're told that at the war's end, Alvia surrendered to Calpheon without putting up a fight, and Balenos was annexed to Calpheon, from then on to be an integral territory of the kingdom. This means that when Serendia and Kaplan fought against Calpheon, Balenos joined them and rose against the Eagle as well. It was not stated anywhere, but unless it revolted against its master, Balenos' capital wouldn't need to surrender to Calpheon after Keplan was conquered and Serendia made peace, and there wouldn't be any need to state that Calpheon was now annexing Balenos. It shows the relationship between the two was likely that of a protectorate before, and that after this war, the kingdom of Balenos formally ceased to be. Not much has happened in the land of Balenos since then. Now a territory of the Republic of Calpheon, the former ruling house of Bartali continues to rule as mere chiefs of the town of Velia, and likely the forgotten Alvia. We're told a star fell in the Forest of Seclusion in the year 276, though searching parties found no evidence. Our playable character is that star. After the disaster that befell the kingdom of Medea to the east in the year 277, a sizable portion of the Medea army deserted and took residence in the ruins of Cron Castle. Rumors say they have fallen under the control of the god the immortal alchemist had tried to summon 150 years ago during the ritual that caused the downfall of the kingdom of Cron. There have been some back-and-forth skirmishes between the exiles of Medea holed up in the ruined fortress and the goblins, and while some sources say the exiles want to eventually expand their land and take over Balenos, they've done nothing of the sort for now. In the present day, the imps have become even more agitated, and the raids against trade caravans have increased to the point that contact between Velia and Alvia has been cut. The Duchy of Serendia to the south, also part of the Republic, stationed a detachment of its army at the crossroads of central Balenos, trying to subdue both the local imps disrupting east-west trade and the bandits to the south disrupting north-south trade. Serendia had to send its forces to help their northern neighbors, presumably under the orders of Calpheon, because Balenos possesses no military. The security of villages, roads, and farms depends on an ill-equipped group of vigilantes. The latest events of any importance are the following. Thanks to the insistence of the trade manager of Velia, the coastal farming hub has expanded its wharf into a proper harbor. The entrance into ancient ruins within the Forest of Seclusion has been discovered, and Serendia has sent its soldiers to control it and hired an excavation team to unearth its secrets, and hopefully bring back stones, though all they found was black spirits and the player character. That is where we begin our journey, in the world of Black Desert. And now for some notes. Opposite to what the localized text says in Ancient Stone Chamber, Mural of Prophecy 1, the original does not state King Noir founded Cron Castle. In the entry Ramones of Balenos, when it says the founding king of Balenos is Bartali, it refers to the kingdom of Balenos after the death of King Noir. Likewise, Ramones, as the guardians of Balenos, refers to Ramones as the patron saint or guardian deity of Balenos. As for the king named Bartali III being the last king of Balenos to employ Ramones, It is either referring to the third member of the Bartali dynasty on the throne in the kingdom of Balenos later in time, or perhaps it is a typo, and it meant King Noir in the kingdom of Cron.